Earlier in the year, I made heaps of modifications to my bandsaw. That was a very popular video, and many of you wanted to see a homemade blade oiler video, so here it is. There's different ways this could be done. It's basically just dropping some oil onto the blade in a controlled way. Others have used the system where the oil can is mounted up here on the saw. It's quite clever. The can is at an angle where it only drips with gravity when the saw is horizontal. The downside is there's no lubrication when the saw is upright, so you'd still have to apply oil manually. There's also no control of the flow when it is horizontal. I'm going to try this ball valve to try and slow that down. I bought it from the hardware store along with these caps, and I also got some of this clear tube, and I'll use that as the actual oil container. I've got a box of old air fittings which should be useful too, so anyway, let's get started. I'll use about 5 inches of the hose. I was going to make my own end caps, but then I saw these in the store and they fit perfectly. They'll need sealing, but I think it should work okay. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll find out. I'll make a couple of brackets for it later on, and I'll mount it somewhere here on the saw. The valve will get fitted to the one end, and then a hose will come from that, and that will feed oil onto the blade. All of the oilers that I've seen so far fed the oil onto the blade here. Instead, I'm going to do it inside the casings on this side of the blade. That will be less obstructive. It won't get in the way of the guides or the workpiece. I'll drill and tap a hole in one of the end caps to fit the valve. It's not in the centre as the oil needs to run into it when the saw is horizontal, and when I fix it to the saw, I'll lift up the one end to help with that as well. I should mention that I did make this video about 6 months or so ago. It was for my Patreons, and I thought now would be a good time to show it here. I do make the odd Patreon build video here and there, and I also make regular workshop update videos. If you're interested, check it out. Now I'll drill the opposite cap, which will be the inlet to fill the oil. I'll then thread the hole and make a screw to fit. For the screw, I'll use this bronze round bar as I don't have a suitable size piece of brass. If you click the link in the description now or go to my website paskmakes.com, this Black Friday Cyber Monday I'm offering the Dart, my marking knife, at the lowest ever price. The Dart was a build that I originally released on YouTube, and as it was popular and I really enjoyed using it in the workshop, I spent about a year or so having it made available, which you can now access in the link below. It's a great marking knife with a 420 stainless steel blade and a leather stitched handle. That's a perfect addition to your workshop or a great gift for any woodworker. So before this Black Friday Cyber Monday sale is over in the next couple of days, make sure to click the link in the description and take advantage of this opportunity before it ends. And as always, thanks for the support. To get the threads a bit closer, I'll turn the die around and that will let me get an extra thread. It won't get all the way there, but it will be closer. I will face up the other end, but while I have the bronze bar in the chuck, I'll quickly make a washer. To hold the threaded part of the screw, I'll swap the chuck for a collet chuck. The pressure will be more even across the threads, which will be less chance of any damage. It's not quite running concentric, but it's only a screw for an oiler on a cheap bandsaw, so it'll be fine. It will need sealing, but I'll deal with that later on. Next, I'll make some brackets to mount it. None of this is very pretty. I'm just manhandling the brass strip into shape. I really should find the time to make some bending jigs. That's one side done. Now to try and do the same on the other side, and here's how the bracket will hold and clamp the oiler. It looks decent enough. I'll make a second one, but this one will be a touch shorter. I reckon it looks pretty good, or at least it's not ugly. Hopefully when I seal all the joints they won't leak. Anyway, next I'll mount it to the saw. I'll drill and tap directly into the saw body, and because my tap drills are cheap, I'll drill an undersized hole first and then finish it with the correct size, which is 4.2mm for an M5 thread. I have a few boxes of different nuts and bolts, and these ones were very cheap. I think I got them off eBay or Amazon, I can't actually remember, but I reckon that they're definitely worth getting a set for your workshop. I'll use this old push fit air fitting to get the oil through the saw and into the blade. Now I'll make a block from this scrap of aluminium to surround the blade. The oil will flow into it and hopefully lubricate the blade in a controlled way. I've milled it square. Next I need to take some off the one edge to match the angle of the saw body, but first I'll drill a hole for the tube to fit into. I'm drilling almost all the way through, but not quite, just leaving a couple of millimeters. I'll cut a slot for the blade, and I'll put the tube in first so I can cut the slot in that at the same time. Next I'll add a second bolt going through the same procedure. I'll do a quick test just to see what happens. There's no control of the flow, but it is coating both sides of the blade, so I'll take the oiler back off the saw, strip it down and seal the joints. I'm not 100% sure how well this will work, but I'm hopeful as there isn't any pressure involved. Fingers crossed it doesn't leak. I realised that I don't need the washer that I made earlier. I found some thick rubber to make a washer from that will seal the screw to the cap and also make up that section where there's no thread. I was always going to do this, but I was going to use a thinner piece of rubber, and that's why I thought I needed the washer. Here's a couple of different cutting oils that I generally use, but as they're quite thin, I think this ISO 68 will be easier to control the flow being a bit thicker. It's what I keep in this can, and it's what I use for the ways on my lathe and milling machine. I almost forgot, and I should have done this earlier, the cap needs a breather hole to let the air in and allow the oil to flow. It's positioned to be near the top when the saw is vertical and horizontal. It's all done, so let's give it a go. I'm hardly opening it up at all, and I'll keep adjusting it just to see what happens with the flow. That was too much, but it seems to be working well. I'll keep testing it to find just the right spot. Now I need to always remember to turn it off, but that should become second nature. And a quick test with it vertical, which also seems to be working well. One modification I may make, but I'll see how it goes, is to add a wiper to the blade, and that may push the oil towards the teeth more. I also did a couple of other quick modifications to finish the saw. The screw was always a pain, needing a screwdriver, so I made a small thumb screw. Also, I made a chute to catch the chips when the saw is cutting in the upright position. It's now 6 months later, and a couple of things to note. One, I forgot to turn the oiler off 3 or 4 times, but it did become second nature. The other thing was the ball valve lost the ability to control the flow. I'm really not sure why, but I plan on swapping it out with a needle valve. I love all the other modifications I've done to the bandsaw, and they all work perfectly. Check that video out if you haven't seen it already. I reckon the oiler is great too. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.